Hi, everybody. This is the HackerNoon podcast, and today we have a special guest with us. Her name is Jennifer Hooper. She heads the Codeish podcast, which is brought to you by Heroku. It is a part of the Heroku family, which is a part of the Salesforce family. But with Jennifer Hooper, like Codeish had its own legs to stand on. It exists separately from Heroku, and today we would be talking about how she took this podcast, uh, an avenue that is not much liked by developers, but she has worked at it and made it into something that we all know and love. And today we would be talking about how does a technology podcast grow? Like, what does it take? I know everybody knows that it takes blood, sweat, and tears. That's true. But there is some secret magic to it, and we hope that Jennifer would tell us more about it. So, without wasting much time, I'd like to introduce Jennifer to you guys and let her tell us a few things about what she has been up to and what she plans to do next. Hi, Jennifer.
Hello, thank you for having me on. I wanted to start by, talking a little bit about Codeish, just to make sure that people have a little bit of the history, because I think that will help in what I'm talking about. So Codeish was a podcast that myself and some of our developer advocates had launched a little over a year ago now. And we really wanted to create something that was giving back to the community, something that was aimed at developers and that they found use, inspiration, or value from. When we first brought it out, we wanted to think about what types of content we would put on there. And so we came up with 4 categories. We post things in the category of dev life, which is all around things that are useful as a person. It could be, we have episodes on meditation, for example. We have episodes on working remotely and things along those lines. We also have a section called tools and tips. And the tools and tips could be anything from, learning how to speak at a conference to having a tool that's like a technical tool and how to do that. We do technical deep dives, and we call, and then we also have a section called Heroku in the Wild. And, when we created this, I created guidelines and everything. It's very clear. We're not looking to promote Heroku. We're not looking to advertise Heroku. We're not looking to advertise or allow anyone else to advertise on here. We wanted the content to be relevant. And so if someone comes in and is talking about Heroku, it's more of a deep dive about how someone solved something, to make it be useful and of interest. If we don't want to listen to it, we don't think our audience will want to listen to it. And so that's kind of our bar, right? We're really aiming at that.
We all love it. That's no lie. And I would want to know your perspective as to why you chose to take the difficult path. Just off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure that there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of people who would die to have the Heroku name behind it and plaster it front, right, and center. And you guys went the other way. You belong to the Heroku family and you were like, nah, please, hands off. I'll make sure that I build this thing on my own. What was the rationale behind it?
Well, it really goes back to the purpose of this. We didn't want this to be something that was perceived as being, only about Heroku or a vehicle that we were using to promote Heroku. We really wanted this to be something that was a community effort and something that we were giving back to the community. And if we put the name Heroku in front of it, it just ruins that. It limits what we're able to do. We spent a huge amount of time, I won't tell you how long, trying to come up with a good name. And when we actually came up with the name Codeish, we thought about, all different ways that we could write it. We wanted to write it so that it, looked like code. What we didn't know is that using brackets in a name of a podcast is not the best idea, because a lot of the podcast platforms don't allow you to, search doesn't work very well on those unless you search with the brackets. So, we've definitely had some learnings along the way. But this is, it was something that we did as a labor of love, and something that we want to keep doing as, something where we're giving back to the community and allowing people to have a voice. And so we wanted it to stand on its own, and that's really been its goal.
Nice. And now I'd like to know a bit about how was your first podcast recording experience like? I remember mine. I want to know about yours.
Well, let me tell you, I have never done a podcast before this, and so I'm at least smart enough to know when I don't know what I don't know, and so I did hire a really good audio engineer who was able to give us some pointers and who was able to work with us to edit some on the editing. But I think anyone, in all honesty, who listens to, not all, because one of the things that we really wanted to do in line with making this a podcast for the community is make this a podcast for all of Heroku to feel like they can participate in. So you will hear different hosts. I always look to connect different hosts to different guests to make sure that we're finding people who are passionate about what they're talking about. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but we've had a lot of challenges with sometimes the sound isn't as good as it could be, sometimes there's noise and things that could have been avoided. So we've been keeping a guide about best practices, and it started probably about a couple inches long, and it's now several pages. So it's all a learning experience, and we're just doing the best we can. So it's really me running it. I do have the audio engineer. I have someone who helps me with some of the writing, and but it's just something that I'm loving. I really love working on this podcast.
Hmm. Nice, nice. And how long does it like take you guys to record a podcast and getting it from pre-production to like taking it live? Like what are your timelines like? Like is it a part of your best practices document? And like would you be willing to share that document with us?
I will certainly share the remote practices document. I can easily share that. In terms of the turnaround, it varies. If I know in advance that I want to do a special episode or something that I need to get out quickly, I can really turn things around within a week, but that's pushing people to do things. So my standard turnaround is 2 weeks or longer. Right now, I am in a fantastic position where I have podcasts that are already scheduled and recorded through the end of July, but I'm also struggling now with what is the right amount of time to have recorded a podcast before it goes live. And so I'm still learning some of those pieces. I started out doing 2 episodes a week. I was getting feedback that that was probably too much. So now I've gone down to 1 a week, but I put out some special episodes. For example, we did something celebrating Asian Heritage Month in that was in May in the United States, and that just went out last Thursday. So we're putting out some of these special episodes that are more timely or more special interest, but
Mhm.
I still don't have the all of those things completely nailed down. So as I said, it's a learning experience all the way.
Agreed. And I guess like everything is a learning experience. Like you spoke about the production side of things. And it
Mhm.
agreed, like when you are building something, especially if you are a developer or a product guy, you know that there will always be fires. It's about getting stuff out of the door and how
Yeah.
quickly can you do it and how well is your packaging. I understand that. Now, if I talk about the other side of things, which is the
Mhm.
distribution side of things, which includes the magical words of search engine optimization. So, like, I guess that's a battle unto itself where everybody has their own opinions as to what works, what doesn't work. Google has been helpful in terms of not letting us know anything at all as to how their search engine works. So, how do
Well,
you
not
guys
only
like
that.
take care of it?
Yeah, and with Google, once you know something, they change it because you figured it out. So it's
Yeah,
always a moving target. So
yeah.
there's a few things that we do. When I created the guide around how we do best practices, we do look at how we name things and making sure that those are in words that people understand what the topic is. That's important for search engine optimization, but more importantly, it's important for the user or the prospective listener of the podcast. We want
Mhm.
someone. I would hate to have someone feel like they thought the podcast was going to be about something and then they listened and it was about something else. So we try to be
Yeah.
very realistic about what you're going to hear.
Mhm.
We also put information in the show notes and in the description, and then we also list the transcripts. So we do the full transcript of every podcast we put up on the site, so that gives people we do that for two reasons. The primary one is that some people like to read instead of listen, and
Yeah.
so we want to give people that option. But the second reason is sometimes people search for something, and audio search is not quite as strong as some other
Yeah.
things yet. So allowing people to be able to find something that they wouldn't otherwise find because it's within the transcript, we feel is also another useful tool for people to find things that are meaningful for them.
And that brings me to an interesting question. Like when
Mhm.
you talk about like searches based on audio not being as good, like uh, do you believe that Google and Facebook and all of these guys are listening to us when we speak via our microphones or via our like mobile phones, or like do you believe it's just coincidence?
There's too many things that are coincidence for me to think that there's not some listening. But honestly, I think about what they could listen to when I'm talking, and I'm like, well, they must be awfully bored. So I think I think every company, service, tool out there is looking to constantly improve.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in the market, um, of mass data, as the Googles and the Facebooks and things of the world are, wanting to make it so that you're finding what you're looking for. But even if I'm looking for something and you're looking for the same word, you might be looking for something totally different than I am. So it is a hard thing. So they are always looking for context. And so I appreciate their struggles, and I know that that's what they are doing. But it wouldn't surprise me one bit at all if we found out that yes, they were listening to all of this to learn more about me. There are too many coincidences of things.
Yeah.
So,
And you brought up another interesting point, which was regarding your audience. So your audience
mhm,
is very niche. Like it's not as if it's an like audience that let's say listens to a certain kind of a music, like let's say a rock genre or like something like that. It's very specific. It is for programmers who make up a
mhm,
minority in our world, like whichever way we like look at it. At technology companies, we might feel that okay, so everybody is a developer, but it is not the case with the rest of the world. So your audience is very niche, and you make it a point to ensure that whoever visits your website is not via clickbait. So it's not
mhm,
as if like somebody was looking at something like, okay, learn to code in Python in 30 minutes. And they visit the website and they see, okay, it's going to be a really long task for them.
yes.
It's not that. You keep it very specific. So like, are there any trade-offs for it? Like, are there any thoughts around it as to how you guys like manage to keep it fresh for people whose learnings need to keep growing forever? You needed to know PHP back in the day. Today is something else. Tomorrow it will be something else. I recently found out that everybody hates PHP. I didn't know that.
I have used PHP in the past, so no comment on that one. Um, well, what we're always looking for are things that we find interesting. So, I did more development in my younger career years than I do now. So I'm not the person who's going to sit down and write all the code, or you wouldn't want to pay me to do that. But I work with, I have that mindset, and I work with so many developers, and anything subjects that I see that are getting them excited,
Mhm,
are candidates for, great podcast episodes. So
mhm,
that's, the biggest way that I find content is by listening to conversations, listening, not eavesdropping, but if someone's presenting something and people are asking a lot of questions, and it's like, oh, and that's something that's not too niche, that feels like that would be like a really great, sorry, my earbud fell out. I think that would be a really great, possibility to put up on Codeish. And then especially when there's, newer technologies or web standards or things that we're passionate about. We have done several podcasts on accessibility, and that's something that is part of a lot of the things that we support at Heroku.
mhm,
It's Pride Month now, and you'll see some Pride things being highlighted on our sites. And the values that we have internally, we also, not in a preachy way, um, you know, want to be able to put some of those thoughts out there as, speaking like real people, because everybody out there is a real person, and that's what we're looking to
Yeah.
do.
I guess like this is a problem that most technology companies face because we interact so much with computers that
Mhm.
we start to think algorithmically, or like maybe I'm like using the word wrong, but we start to think of the world as black and white. We don't see grays, we don't see a lot of the things. We lose our emotions. It's like just to like put things very like simply. And like it's really nice that like, you guys think about these things, that we are humans after all. We are built up of multiple emotions and whatnot. So yeah, this is very nice to hear. So like what could we expect in this like upcoming Pride month? Like can you give us a sneak peek of that?
Well, I think it's quite likely that you're going to see some special episodes that will be focused on Pride in one way or another coming up. So that will definitely be happening.
Mm-hmm.
This isn't podcast related, but if you go to heroku.com/art and use the hashtag Pride, or just scroll down the page, whichever you prefer,
Okay.
we've launched some new wallpaper to celebrate Pride. So
Mm-hmm.
we did some last year that was really successful, and I have a fantastic designer on my team. His name's Charlie. I'll give him a
Mm-hmm.
shout out.
Yeah.
He designed that. So he's also designed the Codeish logo and everything else that we've done. So, we are just looking to, and not just talk about it. There's so many things that people are doing internally. We want those stories to come out.
Yeah.
So that's really what it's about. It's not about promoting ourselves or promoting that we value this. It's about being authentic with who we are and not hiding from what we're not good at, because there's a lot of things that we're not good at too. So those are the stories that I like to tell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nice. And I'd like to know more about like what does a regular day when you guys are recording a podcast looks like. Is it that all of you guys clock in at 6 a.m. and then clock out like when it's done? Like walk me through a day, like maybe a day when you were like, oh my God, when will this podcast end?
Well, it's not quite because we went the route of using different hosts. And if you listen, you'll also hear different Herokai. That's what we call,
Uh-huh.
people who
Nice.
work here. You'll hear different voices at the introduction for every episode. And so we did that on purpose because we really wanted the podcast, as I said, to be from all of Heroku. So you'll hear all of these different voices.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes we'll have 2 or 3 podcasts recorded in a day, and sometimes people will go off and record them, and something just shows up in my inbox like, here you go, I'm done, here's the file. So it's not quite as centralized as that. So it's just a matter of getting things scheduled. I manage all of the production pieces of it, so I have to make sure that I try really hard not to have too many things of the same type in a row, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to vary those and trying to time things to something that might be, relevant at the same time. So, but I've had a few periods where I was expecting a podcast, and for one reason or another, it didn't come through. And then I had to scramble. So I've definitely called on favors for, hey, can you do this really quickly? And, getting it posted like minutes before it's going out through the RSS feed. And we send an email too that you can subscribe to learn what for each podcast. So yeah, there's definitely been some of those just in time kind of episodes as well.
We've all been there. We've all been there.
And
Right.
I'm sure it won't be the last time. Yeah.
That is the beauty of the creative side of things. Like people think that programming is black and white, but if you like look at it, like it's creative, it's art, it takes time. Like you might write a program a certain way, the other guy writes it in a very different way. And podcasts, like they just take it to another level where they have a different way of talking, a different way of presenting things and whatnot. So yeah, I get it. Would you like to also share some tidbits about like what is that secret ingredient that you guys put into your podcast? Like how do you get that distribution? Everybody wants to know, everybody has an idea. I want to know from someone who got it cracked. is there a secret door that you guys like walked by? We're like, okay, so we found the secret door. The first rule of the next floor is never tell it to the guys on the lower
I'm a big believer in sharing all learnings. And I also will say, I think we've cracked the door, but we can always improve. I ask everybody all the time for any feedback that they have on things we could do differently, things we could do better, things that people want to hear. I think the thing that has made Codeish successful is that we do have people being authentic on there, and we are very true to our mission of making sure that all of the posts are, not everything's going to be interesting to everybody,
Yeah.
but everything is aimed at a developer audience, either at the person themselves. Like I said, we have a Dev Life series, and we were really passionate about doing that because we really want to make sure that we're, being able to speak about all of these different things. And we wanted to make sure it never felt like it was a waste of your time or that you were being marketed to. And so that's, just keeping true to our mission and our values, I think, and delivering consistently on those is what makes for, a good podcast that people start to trust in terms of the content that's coming.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And like, what would be your advice to someone who was just starting their podcast? Like maybe in terms of tools that they should use, some good practices that like can only be learned via trial and error, which you learned and might maybe think that the new guy might need that help from.
So a few things. One is when we put this out, we decided to host it ourselves. And, I don't like to put in all of the tracking and other information, so I only know directional measurements. I don't know like completely accurate measurements, but that's fine. That's not what we're going for here. So I think the thing that is what I would say is my biggest advice is be clear about what you're trying to do with a podcast and what it's about and what voice you want to have, and always stay true to that. As soon as you start deviating from that or bouncing around, it makes it very hard for people to engage with it and to know what to expect. So I think that's one thing.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is just to learn. If something didn't work well, somebody, just be able to laugh at the things that you get wrong and, do something else. It's just, that's, make it a labor of love, not a job to do it. It's a fun thing to put out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Like,
And in terms
mm-hmm.
of other advice, just don't use special characters in your name. Definitely a learning.
So, like, you guys never toyed with the idea of changing your name, or like you guys had grown into such a big organization in terms of readership that you chose that, okay, we are going to stick with it because this is how, like, this is what we are now.
Codeish is what Codeish is. In fact, we've launched, some of my colleagues in Japan have launched a Japanese version of it. So if you speak
Mm-hmm.
Japanese, you can actually listen to not translated versions, but your own unique versions that are recorded in Japanese.
Wow.
And so they leveraged all of the same practices that we had done in the United States to do them in Japan as made sense. And so it's really around, Codeish will exist. As long as Codeish exists, it will be exactly as it is today, a
Mm-hmm.
podcast for developers. At some point, if Codeish, we say, you know what, we can't support this anymore, or this doesn't make sense, or any of those other things, it will stop existing. But as long as I have a say, at least I should say, or anyone that I work with, we won't want to change the purpose of this. This is Codeish. If we wanted to do a different kind of podcast, we would create a different podcast.
Mm-hmm. Got it. And like, how do you see the world of those YouTube programmers who are like, okay, I just need a chalk and a board and I will teach you what a class is or what an instance is. Like there are those side of things, and then there is like people who do it very profit. Like although I'm not saying that those guys don't do it professionally, because it is
Mhm.
professional. But like, how do you like guys like what do you guys think about that side of the industry who are like not hosting it on their on their own platform probably don't have the kind of resources that you guys do, or like maybe they do, I don't know. But like, how do you like see them, and like what do you think that the future holds? Is it going to be more YouTube driven and anchor.fm driven, or is it going to be self-hosted, something like maybe Joe Rogan was back in the day, but like although now he like signed off to like Spotify.
Yeah. I think if you look at the history of things, online and the internet, you see a lot of, different solutions that people create and things that they do and they host themselves. And then you see that some of the more standard solutions become, more accessible with easier to use. The cost comes down or becomes free. And you'll see that there's all of those things. And so it's kind of an ebb and flow, I think. So I think in terms of the future, there will be more standardization on some of the platforms, but then there'll be the next new thing that we're not doing yet. And we'll have all of those new, tools and platforms and things out there. If you look at like podcasts, you look at, there's the main, some of the main podcast sites, like Apple Podcasts and Google Play and those. But then you've got a world of apps that have been created that are just allowing you to sit on top of those and customize like individual at the episode level instead of at the show level. And I think things will keep getting smarter and smarter. I think more and more types of information is going to get consolidated, and I think that's the biggest trend that we see. It's just you keep getting more and more great information, but it's impossible to keep up with everything. So how do you, so I think as you watch how things evolve, a lot of it's really about how can you make it so that the end user can actually pay attention and, find the things that are of interest to them instead of just all of the noise that, you feel like you're underneath an avalanche under. So I think, and in terms of video versus audio versus writing, I think there's multiple pieces to that. One, I think certain pieces of content or things you're trying to teach might be easier to do in different types of content. But I also think that they can supplement each other really well. I will, on our engineering blog, you'll see several articles that we've written recently that are expanding on things that we've talked about on Codeish and then point to Codeish for, more details. So, there's some people who like to read, some people like to listen, and some people who like to, kind of watch. And then there's also different things that you can say in each of those. And I think they can easily supplement, all of them can supplement each other.
Got it. Nice. And like now I have a question related to what I think is more the new normal related kind of a thing. So earlier, like podcasts could easily be longer because most of the people listening to them were listening to them during their commutes or listening to them on their free times. But today, where everybody is home, I guess people are like listening to podcasts like a lot more, yes, but their attention spans are smaller because now they are checking their phones for their Facebook messages or whatnot while they are listening to podcasts. So because of that, I see a growing trend where what people do is that they release small snippets of their like content pieces. Like I don't want to use the word podcast because it's video and audio, and like sometimes it's both. Like all the like video like has audio, but coming back, so they have snippets of that. So instead of a 30-minute episode, what they do is that they have 5-minute snippets and then a 30-minute episode. So now instead of one 30-minute episode, they have 6 pieces of 5 minutes each, and then that 30-minute thing. So now they have 7 sources of like views coming over to them. Has Heroku tried that model, or will Heroku like look into that sometime later?
That's something we need to figure out. You'll see that we are, I'm still putting out the podcasts. I'm still doing that. We definitely have a change in listenership, as you would expect. I mean, I used to commute an hour and a half an hour to an hour and a half each direction.
Wow.
And I don't have that commute time anymore. So that's where a lot of people do listen to things like podcasts or other things where, either on their way to work or on their way home. And when you're not commuting to work or home from work, you don't have that time.
Yeah.
And when you are, at home, a lot of people now, will have their families there, will have, children, pets, maybe parents, things, other things that are taking up their attention.
Yeah.
And so I definitely think some of these things like podcasts and videos are things that are people just don't have as much time for. We are seeing that people are still really listening to the newest episodes we put out, but some of the plays of ones that people might be searching for some of the older ones definitely seem like they're going down. But that's okay. Like I'm not in this for measuring the numbers completely. I mean, look at numbers to make sure that I'm doing things that people are finding value in, or else they wouldn't be coming back. But it's not a pure numbers game on our side. We have played with different formats of things. A lot of the podcasts we do, we try to make them between 25 and 35 minutes at most. And if they are longer, we'll break them up. If you break them up too much longer, though, I think a lot of these just, they're telling the story. They're not going to be as useful. Yeah, so that was a very long answer to if it makes sense. We do have some bite-sized things that we put up on YouTube about using, Heroku and seeing those things, which we'll keep doing. But things like, some of the podcast episodes, I don't see us, I don't think that I'll be changing them quite a bit. But, even in the past, I put out an episode that was only like 10 minutes, but it's like, but that's how long it was. So it's totally fine. So I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I think to me, it's more about the making sure that we're not artificially limiting something just because we feel like, we want to be sensitive to the situation and not overwhelm people. And we want to provide things of value, but sometimes giving smaller pieces of things can diminish the value. So it's a trade-off that we're always, that always open to. I'll just leave it at that.
I can totally understand. Yeah, I get it. Because we cannot see the future and like it could be anything. Yeah, I get it. Now, I'd like to know more about in terms of marketing, because you are in the industry of creating content, especially original content. You would have been propositioned by certain like I won't use the word shady organizations, but let's say organizations who are into the marketing business who tell you, oh, so you have a podcast, we'll market it, we'll make sure that you have 1 million views, we'll make sure that it gets upvoted by 200,000 people in the first 1 hour. Do you know people who use that? And like, what do you think about it? It's the fake it till you make it business.
Yeah. I don't know anyone who uses those services, but I will tell you, I am approached frequently, and I'm approached frequently not just for podcasts, but for our website, for people wanting to post things on our blog and they'll pay us money, and where they want to put ads on there. And so there are so many opportunities if that's the way you want to go. I mean, for some people, maybe that's useful. I don't know those scenarios. For us, like I said, we really wanted this to be something that was relevant for developers, and we wanted to control the quality. We want to control, what we put out there. And that also includes how it's presented to the world. And some of these services, while I'm sure they do great things, in some cases, getting like oversaturation of a brand in places where it doesn't make sense, it's actually a negative to me.
Yeah.
When I see those brands everywhere, and it makes me not want to use a product, right? It's
Yeah,
like it does the
exactly.
opposite to me. So like I said, I'm not focused. And when I say it's, I'm lucky enough that my organization supports me in this too. It's not about the pure numbers. It's not about making sales. It's not about that. It's about delivering something that's giving back to the community. And so that's really what our focus is. And it's not about the promotion of it in a, trying to get up to millions and millions and millions of viewers like right away.
But you are too like nice in your answer. Like I'll try to poke around a bit. Like you must have been approached by people who go and say, okay, I'll help you increase your site authority or your domain authority. Have you never felt the urge to tell them, dude, I am a top 1000 website according to Alexa. Are you going to help me improve?
Yeah. Well, we
You,
also get ones
you
where
from a
people.
Gmail account. Are you going to help me improve?
Well, I will
That's
tell you some of
true,
my
man.
favorite ones are people telling
Yeah.
us about, oh my gosh, your site has so many errors, or you really need to change this because it's like, no, come on. Or people who write to me and spell Heroku wrong. I'm like, I can help you improve your site quality, dear Herco E or something. It's like, okay, yeah, no. So we've had some, there's always like kind of the wall of fame or shame, however you want to look at it,
Uh-huh.
of some of the people reaching out to us. And, so yes, I've never bought one of those things, and I've never followed up on one of those, but yes.
I guess the urge like must have been there to respond to these people. And if you haven't yet, you can use this platform to respond to all of them at once.
Yeah, it's yeah, yeah, it's like get it. That's the one thing I would say is, I know it's the same group of people sending the same, you get the same exact message with the same typos from multiple different people. It's like, if we're not interested, we're not going to be interested if you send it under another name. Just, come on, leave us alone. That would be truly appreciated.
Yeah,
But
got it. And with that, we are approaching the end of our podcast. And I'd like to ask you if you have any messages for your HackerNoon readers.
oh, I would just say, thanks for listening here. If there's absolutely anything at all, like feedback that you have on Codeish or any questions, feel free to, reach out to me. You can find a link, just send it to feedback@heroku.com. I shouldn't say that here. I do get that. It is not for support or anything like that, but you can send, comments about the podcast or feel free to reach out to me directly. And just, HackerNoon's a great place to find content. We've definitely shared a lot of content through there. We've done some great AMAs. We're looking forward to doing more. So love the community there.
Definitely. And I'd like to add over here that Heroku is one of the very few organizations that create original content as a brand just for HackerNoon. Like you have your own huge repository of blogs and whatnot, and you choose to create new content every time. Like that is very appreciated by me, by the HackerNoon team, as well as our like entire readership. And with that, I'd like to take your leave. Thank you for your time, Jennifer. Thank you for being on the
Thank you.
HackerNoon podcast. Looking forward to have you again.
All right. Thank you. Anytime.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.